Welcome to Firsts in Fiction, your first stop for learning to write fantastic fiction. I'm your host, Aaron Gansky, author of The Bargain, The Hand of Adonai series, and Firsts in Fiction.
And I'm Alton Gansky, the author of Finder's Fee and really just a whole bunch of other books. And glad to be here once again.
And I'm glad to see both of you here together. I am Molly Jo Riley, producer of the First in Fiction podcast, author of the Unemployment Cookbook and the upcoming mystery location novel, NOLA.
And a quick reminder to those of you listening to us on the audio-only podcast, you can watch us live at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on aarongansky.com. You can also do it on YouTube if you're a little more savvy. But aarongansky.com, best place to do that. We'd love to have you along in the chat room so you can make some comments and make fun of me and, all that good stuff. So it would be great to have you along. If you are watching us on YouTube, we do ask that you click that thumbs up button. Helps us out quite a bit. And don't forget to subscribe. And if you are chatting live with us, don't forget to share that with your social media groups. You can do that by clicking on the buttons that are at the top of the chat room, and that will automatically share out to all your friends and family where you currently are. I think I got everything. Did I get everything?
I am so proud of you. I could almost cry right now. I got to bake you a cupcake or something that was so good.
Wow. Eventually, I should probably practice this a little bit more often, but that would take more time and effort.
We're just going to take the win for this moment.
We'll take the win for this moment. Absolutely. So, well, we've got an Ask the Author question from James Earls via Facebook. And it's apparently a somewhat popular question. We've also had some other people comment on our social media channels that they've had similar questions. And his question is this: are agents and editors absolutely crucial to the writer's life and their success or lack of it? I do my own editing and do not have an agent. It's time consuming, but after my past experiences with them, meaning editors and agents, I got burned twice. I developed a lot of mistrust. Is there hope for me? So that comes from James. He submitted that via aarongansky.com. So thank you for that. And there's always hope. There's always hope. So as far as I'm concerned, agents and editors are still necessary. I would be terrified to navigate the waters of publication without an agent watching out for me, without having an agent that I trust looking out for my best interest. This is something that they do often. They're typically good at it and skilled at it and have the experience that I personally do not have within the industry. They have connections that I don't have. They know what to look for in contracts, things that I might overlook or misunderstand. So I would hate to think that all of that was on my shoulders. You might be a little more savvy than am I in those types of legal regards. And if so, great. If not, I really do recommend an agent. And editors, as terrified as I would be to navigate the waters without an agent, I would be even more terrified to send my work out into the world without a good pair of eyes, having gone over it. I was a professional editor for a number of years. I have been teaching English for way too long. I am really gifted in the ways of grammar and punctuation, etc. And my editor simply puts me to shame. Every time I feel like I know something, I just send her an email and say, what's something I don't know today? And she's quick to let me know there's a lot, apparently. So knowing the different style guides, etc., even professional editors, if they write their own book, they're going to have a different editor because you need a different pair of eyes on your work. Pops, we've talked about this before, where when you're reading over your own particular work, you become somewhat blind to the mistakes that you've made because your brain will kind of fill in the blanks or translate as necessary. It's kind of a psychological thing, but it's still a fact that remains. It's very easy to miss mistakes in your own work. And I think that the editors and agents play a very important role, even if you're not 100% in love with them. I've worked with editors I wasn't in love with. I will say that they were not particularly to my taste. We differed in a lot of different areas, and we had some productive conversations via email, etc. But we handled it like professionals, both of us, and we talked about our disagreements, and we finally came to some agreement. I don't think the answer is to give up on agents and editors if you've had a bad experience. I think instead it's to continue to be hopeful, continue to look forward to finding a good agent and editor, one who has your best interests in mind, one who is skilled at their job as you are skilled at yours. That's my very short, in quotes, answer. That's my 2 cents there. How about you, Pops?
Well, James, there is hope for you. Aaron, on the other hand, well, I'm just going to move on.
Thanks, Pops.
Let's talk agents first. If you're trying to place your first book, you will probably need an agent. It is not required, and I'll talk about that in a second, but it's good to have an agent. A good agent is invaluable, but the key is it's got to be a good agent. And one of the problems is there is no licensing program for agents. Anyone can be an agent. They can, put out a shingle and say, "Hi, I'm a literary agent," and have perhaps never written a book, edited a book, really not worked in the field, didn't work in publishing, those sorts of things. And so what many of them do is, they're just learning, and they're learning at your expense. So you have to be kind of careful with that. So a good agent is wonderful. And as we said before, a bad agent is worse than no agent. So you have to use some wisdom in selecting these. And they are difficult to get. It's just, I'm not going to put any frosting on this thing. They're hard to get because there are fewer agents than there are writers, and there are a great many writers. So, and many of them, to make their money, take on a great deal of writers called their stable. That's one of the terms they use in publishing. An agent has a stable of writers, and I've always wanted to eat a little hay or something every time I refer to that way. So to make money, they often take as many clients as they can get, whether or not they think they can place them. So you have to be careful in that. But remember, if you're writing for publication, you're in business. It's not just art. You're in a business, so there's going to be things you're going to have to do, and no matter what business you go into, there are things you have to learn. All righty. Now, just real quick about that, if there's an agent who wants to charge you reader's fees, my personal recommendation is move on. In fact, the group, or the Association of Agents, do not allow their agents to charge reading fees. A reading fee is, well, you pay me $50 or $100 or something like that, and I will read your work, and then if it's good enough, I will represent you. If not, I'll just tell you that it's not. Well, that's how they make their money. They're not making their money on selling of books and off that kind of commission. So you have to be very careful about that. Now, that's not to say that an agent won't have additional things in their contract, such as charging you for specialty mailing. Most things done electronically now, but I had an agent that would do that, and I think over the years, I don't think I ever spent more than $25 in a year, when they're mailing stuff overseas, that sort of thing. So I don't think I ever spent over $25. But that's a different thing. Those are dealing with unusual costs with that. That being said, yes, you can still place a book without an agent. In the general market, it is very, very difficult. Publishers use agents as their first readers. They let the readers they let the agents do the rejecting, and then if something comes from an agent and the agent has a good reputation, then it gets seen. So it's almost, it's not impossible, but it's more difficult to place a book without an agent. But it can be done, and the best way to do that is to go to writers' conferences where they have pitching sessions, and you can sit in front of an editor, pitch the idea to them, and they'll say, "Let me see your proposal." And they'll ask for you to mail them the proposal, and you do that. I sold, I think, my first 4 or 5 books without an agent. I got an agent not to sell my books, but to deal with things like contracts, or if I have a dispute or something like that. So if you're submitting, let's talk about the editors now. If you're submitting for regular publication to a publisher, I do not think you need an editor unless you're just not skilled with the grammar, are not able to catch the typos. And I know Molly's going to disagree with me on this.
It's like you already read my part of the notes.
Yeah, but I've been doing it for a long time, and what I found is that's generally not necessary they expect there to be errors in it because it's a draft that you're sending. However, you want it to be as clear as possible, and you don't want to do stupid mistakes because then that just reflects on you as a writer. So if you're not real good at those kinds of things, like Aaron is good at those kinds of things, then you might want to get somebody who knows a few things or hire an editor. Because what's going to happen is if you place the book, the publisher is going to edit it anyway, and it doesn't matter who your previous editor is, they're going to adjust your manuscript to meet their style guides. And they're different from publisher to publisher. I had a book go through a major New York publisher. It had 3 copy editors. None of them liked each other, and they argued over the silliest things. And one would make a change, and another one would come by and take it out, and then the other one would try to put it back in. So it's not cast in concrete, is what I'm trying to say. So what you want to do is present something that's clean, that's easy to read, and has as few mistakes as possible, but they're not expecting perfection. They don't expect perfection on the one you turn in for publication because they know it's going to go to the editor. So one workaround on this is if you have some decent beta readers, people who read a lot, they can catch a lot of the mistakes, and it'll just pop up to them, and they'll circle them and let you know. You're not using them as editors. You're using them to find the obvious stuff that you can no longer see. So they will sometimes point out the problems. But as far as paying an editor for submission, I don't suggest it unless you really have a weakness in that area, which is fine. And some writers do. They know that. And that's the first thing they do is they get someone to go over it for them to make them look even better. All right, take me to task, Molly.
You are so wrong. You're just fired.
Hey, Pops, I need a co-host. Can I hire you?
I was like,
I'm thinking of moving my camera up so you can see the books behind me that I've done. So
I quit. No.
Wow, we're just losing people left and right on this podcast.
I quit every week, and yet here I still am. My definitive answer is yes. As far as the agent goes, I don't have any experience with that, so I'm going to defer to Aaron and Al. But as an editor, yes, you need one. I actually say it because I am an editor, and I've picked up quite a few projects, and it's been going well. But even if if you are submitting to a traditional publisher where they are going to have an in-house editor, I still recommend having your work looked at. If you can't afford a professional editor, let me retrace that. If you want to be recognized as a professional writer, you want to present professional work, and so you would want it to be professionally edited. Now, I understand that for newbie writers or people that are just starting out, they can't afford it or they don't want to do it. Check with college English classes, English programs. They have people that are in that mode that can offer to help for a little bit of extra cash. You can also check Craigslist. I found one of my first editing projects when I advertised on Craigslist, so that helps. And there are people there that'll pay or that you can pay lesser fees to, as opposed to hiring the professional editor. Ask your writer friends for references. There are many types of editing you can pay for, from simple line edits and punctuation and grammar to comprehensive. If you're not sure if you can fit it into your budget, then again, check with your friends or college departments. If your project is worth marketing, I say it's also worth investing in.
I would agree with that. And I would also add a couple of comments here.
Just tell me I'm right and your dad is wrong.
I will stay out of that. I think
he trained you well.
I know, right? It's like a politician. If this is your first project, if you are a new writer, just out of the gate, I would highly suggest hiring an editor. And like you say, Molly, it's possible that it doesn't fit into your budget. I would save, maybe start a GoFundMe, something like that, but find a way to get, I would say, a professional editor, because Pops, as you said, a bad agent is worse than no agent. I feel like a bad editor can actually be worse than no editor. If they are putting in errors, or they are changing the content of your book, changing the style of your voice, those types of things, because they don't understand, they don't have enough experience in editing, that can be just equally as damaging. If you're going to use somebody who's new, who's charging a little bit less, and that's fine, what I would do is I would ask for some sample pages or a sample chapter, pay them for it if they request payment for it, but just do a chapter and see if it's going the direction that you want it to go, to make sure your styles mesh. Because if you hire an editor right out of the gate without knowing what you're getting into, it's very possible that you're going to get your book back in unrecognizable form, or it's just not going to be it's not going to have your heart in it. And so you want to, I think, be cautious and wary of that. I would suggest maybe just, if you're using a new editor, those sample pages, sample chapter might be the best way to go. Was that political enough? Did I dance around that enough?
That was beautiful. Also, tailgating on what you just said, an editor is suggestive. You don't, it's not the law, so, unless it's certain punctuation areas. But if they're making catastrophic changes to your manuscript, you don't have to accept it. Take what you like and leave behind what you don't.
Good points. Good points. All right. Excellent. Well, I do want to move into, unless Pops, you have anything to say, anything else to add on the discussion?
No, I've already given my 2 cents, but just to one thing that Molly said, even in grammar and punctuation, there's variation of opinion. Some people think that what you learned in school is absolutely the way it has to be, and it's not. In fact, we have many grammar rules that aren't really rules. Split infinitive is an example.
Mm-hmm.
Split infinitive, to boldly go where no man has gone before. Boldly separates to from go. So technically, editors will tell you it should be boldly to go, or to go boldly. Excuse me, or to go boldly. But the truth is, it's not wrong to split an infinitive in English. It is in Latin. And somehow that got into teachers' minds, and they would teach us not to split infinitives. And I would tell you now, don't do it, because somebody's going to notice it. So, but it technically is not incorrect. But these things somehow make their way into the thinking of some people. And
excellent. And I'm thinking of Star Trek, and I'm thinking about how the beginning is parallel, to seek out new life and new civilizations, to explore strange new worlds, to boldly go where no one has gone before. So maybe they split the infinitive just to be parallel.
Aaron.
Yes.
Back.
Am I off? Is that a rabbit trail?
You went kind of way out there now, and
okay, all right. There's a fly buzzing around. I don't know if he's coming up on the camera, but he wants his 15 minutes of fame. So.
All righty then.
All right. Well, I did want to get to our main topic tonight, which is marketing and platform. One of the most challenging and most talked about aspects of the writing business, specifically with proposals. Probably the most challenging aspect of the proposal, at least it has been for me, because everybody wants to know, publishers want to know if you are going to sell. And so I'll preface this a little bit by saying why it's so important, why we have to jump through these hoops, because it seems ridiculous. Pops, as you've said, we don't degrees, and yet we're expected to market our own work now. But I'll kind of use an example with the music business, because again, I think the music business and the publishing business is very similar in that it's kind of a high risk industry. They can dump a ton of money into an author or into an artist, and if that author or artist doesn't hit, they are losing a ton of money. And so they want to make sure that their investment is secure. And one of the ways that they do that is to make sure that you are marketable. Back in the days when I was in a band, we actually had interest from a lot of big name record labels. One in particular that was very interested in us, loved our music, loved our sound, loved everything about us. And they simply asked, how many fans do you have? And we're like, well, 6, maybe 16. Like the number that we were thinking had far fewer digits in it than the number they were wanting. And I think their comment to us was, come talk to us when you have 10,000 fans. And my thought was, well, if I had 10,000 fans, I wouldn't need you. And so that's why you'll see the industry has changed both in music and in publishing, to where you've got more self-publishing options and things of that nature, where if you're going to market your own book, maybe I should just publish it myself anyway. But that being said, do not let marketing and platform be a obstacle to your publication. It's something that you're going to have to get to know whether you're self-publishing or not. It's something that the industry expects you to know. When you go to writers' conferences, you're going to see all sorts of classes on marketing and platforms. You're going to see how-tos and all of that. But for our purposes, just to kind of hammer out a few definitions here, we're going to talk specifically about the marketing analysis. And this is where you take a look at your competition. I'm going to put that in quotation marks. You look at similar titles as to what you're writing so that you can establish that there is a market for what you're writing, that the market exists. You also want to mention how your project is different than those other similar titles that you've mentioned, because they don't want to publish the same book that's already been published. And so you'll do a little bit of it's like this, but it's not like this because of this. And we'll get to that a little bit later. When we talk about platform, what we're talking about is the reach. I'm going to put that in quotation marks here. The reach that you have in terms of following, think social media. It could be blogging, it could be speaking, it could be your involvement in a professional community or even a non-professional group. But whatever it is, whatever communities you're tied to, that is your reach. How many people are going to hear about your new book when you say, hey, I've got a new book? Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Excellent. So you're going to say something, Molly, about social media?
I am, because you did hit on the social media as a little bit different from blogging. I put in the notes, there's a link in the show notes, you guys can find it after, but social media fluctuates greatly, and you will find that your core numbers are through Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Google+, and blogging. Primarily Facebook and Twitter are going to be hit about 100% of your audience. So for more information, you can watch our full episode on social media. It is Secrets of a Social Media Ninja, and the link will be in the show notes.
Excellent. Fantastic. Well done. So let's talk about the marketing analysis. There we go. Easy for me to say. The first thing,
I don't think it was.
Yeah. And much of this has been pulled from the proposals that I've done. And again, I do want to reiterate, when you're doing your proposal, check with your agent, check with your publisher to see what they're expecting in these terms. But I found this to be somewhat similar from publisher to publisher. The first thing they'll want to know is similar titles. This is a pain in the hindquarters. It means you're going to be searching for a while, usually on Amazon or at Barnes & Noble, whatever the case may be. But you're going to be scouring books for something that's similar to what you've come up with. I would say the tips that I would give you for doing this is to start with books that inspired your work. You don't have to, come up with brand new book titles that you've never heard of. What books were you thinking of when you were writing? You've got favorite authors, right? If, however, your favorite author is Stephen King and you're writing a romance, maybe that's not what you're going to do. But okay, well, I'm writing a romance. I've never done a romance before, but I know, Nicholas Sparks, and I know Danielle Steele or something like that. So maybe I'm going to look into them. But think about books that have inspired your work, authors that you're already familiar with, authors that you've heard of that write within the genre that you're writing. You don't want to compare yourself to, like Shakespeare. My book is blah, blah, blah. I mean, you don't want to go crazy and talk about how amazing you are, but just say, this book has a similar concept. This book has some similar characters. This book has a similar writing style, those types of things. The second thing you want to do is you want to know your genre. One thing that I like to do is, when I was doing the Hand of Adonai series, I just looked up young adult fantasy novels. And since I was pitching to Christian publishers, I did Christian young adult fantasy novels. And whatever's popping up on Amazon, I'm taking a look at it. And it's yes or it's no. Like, this is similar, this is not. And so you just start kind of opening a bunch of different tabs until you find some that are going to be best suited, most germane to what you've written. Romantic suspense. We've talked before about genre, how most books will cross genres. So look up romantic suspense, look up, political conspiracy thriller, those types of things, and see what pops up. know what they are. Molly, you've got a little part in here of the show notes about, am I suggesting that you read all of these books? No.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. I considered it. I was like, oh man, I got to buy all these books and read all of them. And my proposal is due in a few days. So that's not going to happen. I mean,
but you should, as you're starting to think about being a writer, and what it is you like to read will be what you write. And therefore you should have a good background in your genre. Every once in a while I'll get someone who'll say, I want to talk to you about my book. And I'll say, okay, what are the last books that you've read? And they said, oh, I really like thrillers. I've read a lot of thrillers, and I'll name a few thrillers. And I said, so your novel then is a thriller novel? They go, oh, no, it's a Western. A Western? And how many Westerns have you read? I haven't really read that many. And now I know I'm dealing with somebody that doesn't understand the connection. So those who are doing action adventure, read action adventure. Those who do horror, read horror. Some background in it. Don't want to be one of those people who say, I don't read much, but I want to be a writer. Well, you're asking for trouble, and it will come across in the writing.
Agreed. And that line, I don't really need to read, but I'm a writer, always feels very pretentious and naive, if I could say that without being too pointed. We've mentioned it before. You've got to be a reader, and I agree, Pops. You have to read within your genre. When I started Hand of Adonai, I hadn't read much fantasy, and so I immediately went to my friends who had, and I said, what fantasy novels do I need to read? Give me the best fantasy novels in the last 10, 15, 20 years, whatever. And I started picking them all up and reading them. And I pulled from those. Some of those appeared in my books. My book is similar to these books. Did not compare mine to Game of Thrones, though, because again, I was going for a conservative publishing market. So did not want to say that. But things like the Wheel of Time series, things like the Chronicles of Narnia, which is actually a very close comparison to the Hand of Adonai, and mentioning those types of things, you'll get a good sense about them from Amazon, reading not only the back cover copy or the description of the book, but also publisher weekly reviews if they have them, or other reader reviews. That will kind of help you understand a book if you've not had an opportunity to read it, or will not have an opportunity to read it before you list it on your marketing analysis. But you can still get a good sense for that and include that information. You also want to think cross-genre. My book combines the romance of The Notebook, but with the supernatural bent seen in the likes of Carrie and Lightning. This can be a good thing because an editor can now conceptualize what your book is going to look like, but it can also make it harder to sell if you're not careful. If you keep genres that are just wildly disparate, such as, I don't know, The Notebook and Carrie, different books altogether. So crossing genres can be powerful, but it can also be, like, if you go too far, it can be a detriment. I feel like that's contradictory. Is that confusing?
Yeah.
No.
The book Carrie, who's the author of that?
Stephen King?
Oh, okay. It's just misspelled in the notes. It's I-E, ends in I-E.
Well,
no, it's not.
That was...
And Lightning, is that the Dean Koontz one?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm
sorry, I just confused because I couldn't figure out what the book was. So now we have it.
We're good now.
I appreciate that you called out my spelling error to our listening audience.
On national TV.
While we're recording, yeah.
Yeah. Guess what's getting edited out? Actually, I'm just going to blame you. Pops, I can't believe you misspelled Carrie in the show notes.
Well, I misspelled another word that I had to correct today, but actually I did change that back. I did change it to Carrie, so I don't know how it got back to the original. But anyway, nonetheless, yeah, and it's not unusual to link genres. When you hear professional writers talk about their writing, professional writers talk about their writing, it's usually hyphenated. It's romantic suspense, romantic comedy, police procedural thriller, action adventure. So it's not unusual to hyphenate them. You probably don't want to have 5 hyphens in there, because then you just look confused. But that's part of creativity, is that you're kind of mixing things. So that's not unusual to do.
I agree with that. Yeah, I've talked with people who are, what's your book about? Well, it's kind of an action thriller, romance, comedy genre, bending zombie apocalypse, alien abduction story. What? What is the Amish vampires in space?
Little vampires in space.
Even the Amish vampires in space, you still only have 3 different genres that you're crossing there. So very strange. Seemed to work for them, but
well,
right.
yeah, and there have been some that have done that, but that's what they're doing. It's a bit of a parody. Right. So right. the guy that wrote those has written 2 of them, and by the way, he's a very good writer. I was always put off by the titles, but I was judging a contest, and one of his books came in, and he's a very good writer. I'm sorry I brought it up now because I can't think of his name, but anyway, if you look it up, it's Amish vampires, and what was the other one? Amish zombies, I think, something like that. But anyway,
hilarious.
Yeah, and you'd think this would be the dumbest book in the world. It has to be just totally stupid. It's not. He's having fun with the title, but the story holds together. So, but you're right. He's crossing probably 3 genres together and mixing them up into a stew.
And what's interesting and unique about that is that he's able to do it well. I think of Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, or Pride and Prejudice and Zombie, kind of the same idea. Obviously having fun with it, but you get a good sense of what that book is going to be.
Yeah.
So
there's a market for that, interestingly enough.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I maintain that there's a market for every book. There's a market for every story. Just many of those markets are really tiny. So some are a little wider. And there's actually a pretty good market for that, because I think you get a lot of non-readers who are like, ooh, zombies. Ooh, vampires. That could be fun. Ooh, Abraham Lincoln and vampires. But the sad thing though is that movie was the worst thing that happened to Abraham Lincoln in a theater.
Oh. Move it on, Aaron.
Sorry.
Move it on.
Okay. So I apologize. It had to be said. All right. The book, though, actually fun. Very fun book. Sales analysis. So now we've compared it to other books that are on the market. We've established that there's a market. We've established that there's a readership. We know that people are interested in the genre and they're buying books. Now let's talk sales number.
Okay. Question.
Yes.
How do you recommend that we get the information that you're going to tell us? Is it as simple as looking at the bottom of the Amazon page?
Well, yeah. I mean, the Amazon rank helps. Magic 8 Ball, maybe some tarot cards. Those can be useful. Not so much.
That's sarcasm for those of you that are listening just to the audio only.
Yeah.
You're not advocating that we make up information.
No.
Okay.
Amazon ranks are going to be pretty solid. You can use those. You can look up the information, I'm sure, if you just Google it. But the more data you have, the better off it's going to look to the number crunchers at the publisher. And so if it's listed as a bestseller, you can list that. You can look at the best-selling titles. You can Google it, talk to publishers and see what they say. But usually what I do is just the Amazon rank is usually what I do.
Okay.
Yeah, from a writer's point of view, it's very difficult to get that information. You're not going to get good information. Amazon fluctuates wildly. You can be selling a bunch of books, and an hour later, it looks like it's just dropped off the map because of the algorithm that they use. You can go to the Nook site, barnesandnoble.com. You can go to that, and they rank them also, but it's going to vary. Publishers don't reveal a lot of this information, so you're going to be guessing if you try to get too specific. But what you can do is, if, for example, someone's been on the New York Times bestseller list or some other bestseller list, USA Today or something like that, then you can mention that. But you really can't give them solid numbers because the publisher is not going to put them out there. However, the publisher and the agent, some agents will have access to that information. That information is reported, but I think through a service that you have to pay for. And I don't think any publisher requires that. You just need to list those that have done well, are still high in the Amazon ranks, even though it's been out for 5 years or something like that. But I never put actual numbers to that, because by the time I finish a proposal and send it off, those numbers will be different.
Got it.
So you'll just have to, I think, list their but sales analysis is going to be rather difficult. But by listing all the books that you think are doing well, that gives the publisher a chance to look that information up. This book, I'm going to take a look at that. And then they might be able to track down the actual numbers and see how that worked out, and even chart it perhaps. But those of us working out in the can't get those numbers. Okay. And again, that's where an agent may come in. An agent can probably get some of that information.
Yep. Agents are your friends. We learned that at the beginning of the cast. So,
yeah.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. So you also want to list, as you're listing these books, if you have the sales numbers and they're impressive, go ahead and list those. If you don't, it's not necessary, but it's nice if you can. You also want to mention how your book is different. Mention how it's similar. Kind of do a quick little comparison and contrast. Something like this book has a similar cast of characters in that they're all about the same age and share a close friendship. You'll also want to mention how they're different, though. What sets your novel apart from these, because they don't want to publish the same thing. It's easy to do this and sound like you're slamming the other book, which you want to avoid. The goal is not to say, well, my book is like this one, except mine is good. You want to avoid that. It makes you look kind of petty, and it makes you look a little bit like an amateur. And so you want to avoid that. Instead, just focus on, the actual differences, which would be while these characters go on this particular journey where they need to get this article or item of magical importance, mine go on a different quest. Instead of looking for a magical item, they're looking for a particular person. I always did, when I looked mine up, I did a search for YA portal fantasy, and several of them popped up. But the world building was vastly different. Some were geared toward a younger audience than mine. Some were geared toward an older audience than mine. Some were kind of the thing of a little more dystopian, like let's tear down the evil empire, whereas mine's a little more, I don't want to say utopian, but it's more protect the rightful order, those types of things. So subtle differences like that are important, because it establishes that your book is not just a carbon copy of everything else out there. Nobody wants to publish the next Twilight. They want to publish the next book that sells like Twilight. Does that make sense?
Yep.
All right. So there's that.
Where are we? I've been in the chat room. Where are we?
It's an important part of the process is that when you're talking about why your book is good, that you don't come across as arrogant. Because remember, when a publisher signs a writer, unless a writer's really bringing something that the publisher can't live without, they're entering into a marriage, and they will be judging you on your attitude. So I just read about an agent who got an inquiry that started, "Dear reader / intern, unless your IQ is in the 97 percentile, pass this on to someone whose is, because you won't understand it."
Wow.
But I can tell you right now, that guy or gal is done.
Mm-hmm.
No one's going to sign up. They're going to say, why would I want to, get into a rowboat with this guy? They don't want, and I've seen things like that. I think I've mentioned it on the show a couple of times. I was asked to review somebody's proposal because he couldn't figure out why I wasn't selling, and he spent the first third of the proposal talking about how bad the industry was, and how publishers knew so little, and then he's going to ask them for money for his book. Well, he was done really on the first or second page, and that's what I told him. I said I wouldn't sign you either. I don't know what you're thinking. So don't come across arrogant. If your book has something different to offer than those books do, fine. The other thing you're doing here is you're showing that there is a market for this. There's a market for cozy mystery. And like so many of these other cozy mysteries, this one takes place in a particular situation. You're also showing that you're not a knockoff, such as I remember when Jurassic Park came out by Michael Crichton, and it really hit it big.
Mm-hmm.
There must have been 6 other dinosaur books that came out right after that by major publishers, and they all tanked because they were in essence, just a knockoff, even though the stories were different. But they were trying to get on the coattails. Okay, let your book stand for itself. Talk about what's good about it.
Exactly. It kind of goes back to this idea that Jurassic Park has already been published. Why would you want to do that same thing again?
Mm-hmm.
But in some genres, like mysteries, those just go on and on and on forever. Because and romance. That's why romance is so big. Is you can write 100 different romances, and the market is so hungry for them that they just keep reading. That's what they like. That's their reading diet. But nonetheless, you still have to have a unique voice. Prime books.
Yeah. But your point about Jurassic Park, after Twilight came out, there were a ton of vampire books too. Most of them did not do well. Hunger Games. After Hunger Games, there was a influx of YA dystopian, and okay, that's Divergent did okay, but most of them that are just kind of knockoffs, they don't do well. There's that flash in the pan. So you want to be similar. You don't want to be the same. So there's that. Now, moving on to platform as we get closer toward time here, I want to make sure we have got time for reader comments or listener comments. But the platform, I think the first and easiest step that you can take is to really develop your social media presence, because that immediately shows what kind of reach you have, how many friends you have on Facebook, how many followers you have on Twitter, etc. Now, I'd love to give you a lot more information on this, but it would be really presumptuous for me to talk about social media. And so instead, I'm going to hand it over here to Molly, since this is what you do. This is your shtick. This is your thing. Can you give us just a few bullet points about social media and how authors should be using it to help increase their platform?
Yes. If you don't know what you're doing, don't do it.
Which is why I'm not on Pinterest.
Don't go on Pinterest unless you're going to be active on it. Don't do any social media or blogging unless you're going to keep it active. The same as a bad editor or agent is worse than no editor or agent. Inactive social media can be worse than no social media. If somebody sees that you have a Twitter account but haven't posted for 6 months, you're not keeping up your end of the bargain. So why would people start to follow you? Social media, Al put a note in here, which is great. Thanks, Al. He says social media is the most powerful and influential tool a writer has, and in many ways it has eclipsed blogging. I agree with that because I am more on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram than I am on my own blog. Facebook and Twitter, again, that's where you're going to find 100% of your audience, of your followers. Cross-linking between the two and interacting is huge. You can create private groups, public events, lists. I find a lot of support for writing NOLA through my Facebook group. It's a private group I set up for my followers of the journey while I'm already writing NOLA before it's even published. When it's ready to go, I've got almost 200 people that are going to help me market it on their own social media platforms. And if any of you want to join, I will put the link here in the chat room if you're not already a member. Instagram is a strong contender as well. People are becoming more responsive to instant visuals, so a great photo or a meme can get someone's attention right away when they don't have time to read a paragraph. You want to share your numbers. How many followers do you have? How active are you? But if you have 5,000 followers and only post once or twice a month, you're essentially neglecting them. Mention not just the sites I have no idea what my note says here. Mention not just the sites that you own and that you're on, but how you maintain them. What do? You want to come up with a theme or some kind of continuity. Don't post 9 ways till Sunday of different things on Aaron. I noticed that you have a lot of non-writing related posts for Magic the Gathering.
Mm-hmm.
Someone would think that you like Magic the Gathering.
Oh, I'm trying to give them that impression.
Now, tell the people in the room, Aaron, how does that tie into your social media as a writer?
So this goes back to the what you call it, the professional groups and non-professional groups that you belong to. So I'm actually a judge for Magic the Gathering, which is the premier trading card game, strategy, fantasy themed strategy card game. It's a bunch of nerds that play it, and really smart nerds actually. But we're kind of a close knit group of friends. The
Nerds.
judges are the players. There's a community aspect. And so because I already invest time and energy into that particular hobby, it makes sense that I would engage them and talk about Magic the Gathering because it's something we all love and we can have discussions about it. But then occasionally I'll be like, oh yeah, I got a book. And they'll be like, oh, you have a book? Well, they know me as the Magic guy. They know me as a Magic judge. Hey, let's support Magic judges. And so they're a lot more likely to come out and support me at a book signing, to buy my books, to on Amazon, to tell their friends about it, etc. Because now it's their friend. It's not just this guy I know. It's somebody who's invested in them, shares the same passions as them, etc. So that's one way that I build my platform, is by investing in that particular community. And since they all enjoy fantasy anyway, it's a natural crossover and it makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
Is that what you're going for?
Absolutely. You want to find what does not relate directly to writing, but is an aspect of you and your individual life, and share it and find that common thread between you and your followers. And the last thing that I have, or the biggest piece of advice I am always asked about, give them a reason to care about you, and then they're going to care about what you write. If the only thing you do on social media is say, buy my book, then just open an online store and forget the actual social media. The focus should be on social and using media as a way to get through. But you are not strictly selling a book. You are a person who is connecting with other people. And like Aaron said, oh, by the way, I also happen to have published a book or written a book.
Excellent. Is that it? I was trying to read through the chat room.
It's a busy chat room today.
It is super busy.
We just had 9 people in the chat room, so that's super exciting. Yes, I'm done now. You can continue.
I am pumped up. Okay, well, I'll hit these last few points here fairly quickly. Again, if you want a little more, we'll have all the notes here in the show notes. Those should be up tomorrow. But I want to talk just very briefly about other avenues that you can pursue in terms of increasing your platform. One of the popular ones is speaking. Just understand that not every writer can be a speaker. I might go so far as to say very politely and humbly that not every writer should be a speaker. And I think we've met these people. Some people write because they don't like speaking. They don't like being in front of a crowd. Public speaking is a tough gig. We might be able to string words.
Talk about that. The number one fear in America, Seinfeld said, number one fear in America is speaking before a group. The number 2 fear is death, which means people would rather be in the coffin than at the lectern delivering the eulogy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. It's sad, but it is true. So that may not be your gig, and that's fine. But you'll notice that a lot of writers become speakers, especially when they're writing nonfiction, because that's kind of their platform. They've been in this community forever, and now they're writing about it, or how-to books and those types of things. Maybe they're just going to a library and doing a reading there, or a school, or even just a home school. So it doesn't have to be to a stadium full of listeners. It can be something small, a local writers club or something like that. But if you start on the writing circuit, or if the speaking circuit, that's going to be more promotion for you to be able to market yourself to publishers. Like, oh, I speak regularly at these different writers conferences and to X amount of churches throughout the week, or to X amount of professional groups, motivational speaking. That's kind of my thing. Whatever the case is, that's going to make you a lot more valuable as a client, and a lot more likely for them to invest in you, because you've already done a lot of the groundwork. So that's what I would say about speaking. How about you, Pops?
Yeah, this really applies more to nonfiction writers. But if you are doing public speaking, it's just part of what you do, and it's a good thing to mention. But the transition for the fiction writer, most likely, if you do get a book in print, you have a publisher and they have a marketing and public relations group, you may be doing radio interviews, which is a form of speaking. And that's a whole new thing to learn. And the only thing I can tell you about this portion is that you have to be careful because most, unless you're a huge bestseller, you're not going to get many radio or television interviews because it just doesn't suit itself to commercial radio. When I wrote the book Angel, I had been thinking about that quite a while. Angel is about an alien appears and tries to lead the world into great peace and brings all kinds of things, but turns out not to be what he appears to be. And so when I tried to promote this to the radio stations, I would say that we're all subject to deception, but the worst and most powerful deception is self-deception, which is part of the book. That topic, and so we would talk about how it is that we deceive ourselves, and then they keep mentioning my book. I did do a lot of talking about the book, other than that one element in it, that self-deception is one of our biggest problems. And I did twice as many radio interviews than I'd ever done before. But what I did is I cherry-picked a topic that would be good for radio. So do that. Same thing if your novel has some something else that may have a group associated with it. There's engineers or it's a space agency or something like that. Then you might be able to get speaking gigs there as you talk about how you did your research into and how the fiction changed it. And, but you have to be a little creative in that.
Indeed. Something to think about, and I've often thought about that myself and how I can get into some of those communities to talk about some of those things. But I do want to talk about blogging, and so Pops, I'm going to kind of just mention right off the bat that you don't feel that blogging is super well. You don't feel it's mandatory. Maybe a good idea, but you don't think it's like super necessary. Would that be fair?
For most people, yeah, that's true. Blogging is a good thing, and it's a good way to practice writing. And to get people to follow you, but you need to know something. You need to be writing something people are interested in, that they will follow it. And you'll have to remember, if it's a particular subject, they're following you so they can learn more about that subject, not about your book. So you can mention your book and you put little ads and stuff like that in it. But many writers do not blog. And in some ways, some of the major social media has replaced that. Now, some do because they have stuff to say, and some writers do more than write fiction, so they like the short form and they do those sorts of things. But blogging there are so many blogs, there's so much noise, and most of the things that bloggers put up there just aren't that interesting, and so you can end up actually getting a negative response to it. So if you have something you're a specialist in, you have something of interest to people, feel free to go blogging, and then when your book comes out, you can mention that, and you have a ready base who might buy your book. That's its big advantage.
Absolutely, and I do have a blog, as you guys know, and it was actually recommended that I begin one. I think my first agent, really highly recommended that I have one because it makes me a little easier to find. This is, of course, before I'd published anything. And I thought, isn't it a little premature to have a blog? And she said, an opportunity to increase your reach and your platform. And so I've always looked at it in that sense. But you make some really good points.
Well, and that's good advice that you're getting there, that you're easier to contact and you're building interpersonal relationship with it. And there have been some best-selling books that started off as blogs. Mm-hmm. The Martian. Mm-hmm. I think was published chapter by chapter first as a blog, and there have been several other books that are done that way. Not a lot, something. Mm-hmm. They found just the right recipe for it. So sometimes that can happen. They do with blogs.
I also tend to think that if you're starting to think kind of what my agent was telling me, if you start thinking, I wonder if I should have a blog, that's probably means it's time for you to have a blog. And again, this is just kind of my opinion here, but if you have anything published, I would strongly recommend having a blog, just a web presence where people can go and find your short stories, your articles, your novels, etc. Again, just a place that makes you contactable, reachable. Right. You can communicate and build your community so your readers can connect with you, those types of things. You don't have a lot of money. WordPress.com is easy and free. I would suggest paying a little bit extra and getting a professional hosting package so that you can have something like aarongansky.com, yourname.com, whatever the case may be. They have, pretty much at this point, any web service worth its salt is going to have a blog style interface that you can put on if you would like, because it is so popular now. Find something that you're passionate about, be it writing or something else. And the big thing is you want to produce regular content. Molly, you were saying earlier that inactive social media is no bueno. Right. Inactive blogs, not so bueno, because then people stop checking in. Oh, you haven't written anything in 3.5 months? It's not really, I'm probably not going back there.
Right.
For any reason, unless I get a newsletter or something like that. If you blog about several topics, you'll develop a wider readership. This is one reason why you see people like mommy blogs that talk about parenting and also hotel or restaurant reviews, travel things, family situations, dealing with the school district, whatever the case may be, just all different things that you do as a parent. But you also have another section of readership that's interested in traveling, that's interested in food reviews, that's interested in these types of things. Molly, you've got your cookbook, and so you've got some foodies out there that are interested in what you blog about, as well as your fiction. So you've got that. So you want to be diverse, but you don't want to be so diverse that it's hard to follow. You don't want to have, I don't know, I think it would be tough to do a daily blog that focuses on 7 different, focuses. I think that might be a little bit too much, but 2 or 3 things I think is going to be good. Don't be afraid to pitch your books at the proper times. Don't make every post about your books. The less you talk about your book, the more powerful it is when you actually say, oh, by the way, I'd appreciate if you bought my book. Does that make sense? The more you say it, the less powerful it becomes.
It does, but I want to throw one other thing out here. I've been doing this, well, my first book came out 20 years ago, so this is the 20th anniversary of my first book, and I was writing before that. And over those years and teaching at writers' conferences and stuff, when the internet blogging came along, I discovered a disturbing trend. Advice was being given that you need to blog every day. And that's fine, if you're doing this full time, but if you're writing 500 words every day, that means just in a 5-day week, you're putting out 2,500 words that could have been in your book. Mm-hmm. And what I have found is people are delaying the finishing of their book because they're so busy with social media and blogging. And there you have the tail wagging the dog. So Molly's absolutely right, because I've not been keeping mine up, but I'm retooling my whole blogging and social media stuff. So I'm in the process of retooling that.
I have to mark this point right now. You said I was right, 7:30 p.m. Okay, move forward.
Where it's headed now.
I'm sorry, you were saying that you're retooling your blog, your website.
No, I was saying that you were right in saying that you have to work these things, but it can become so obsessive that it takes would-be writers out of the writing business. And then they have to rush the work that they do instead of producing the work. And I've seen many people do that where they produce thousands of words a week, but they never seem to finish their book. Write the book. You want to be a writer, you want to write novels, write it. And that takes priority over everything else.
I completely agree, Pops. Don't let anything that we've discussed tonight take you away from your actual writing.
Nah. I mean, of writing. It's not more important than your family or eating.
Well, maybe more
Okay.
important than eating, but definitely not more important than family. But yeah, don't let anything that we've mentioned tonight keep you from your project. Finish your project is takes precedence over all these other marketing strategies and platform, etc. This is something to work on when your project is done, or in between, or on your off day, or whatever the case may be. I would say if you're blogging more than once a week, that might be too much. You might be able to do twice a week, but I wouldn't do anything more than that. Um, just putting this podcast together represents quite a few hours of my days, of my weeks that have to go into preparing show notes, to formatting the audio and uploading things and downloading things, etc. So it's a bit of a process, and but it's a labor of love, and it does not take me away from my writing, because I make sure to prioritize that as well. This podcast, as much as I love our listeners, my writing comes first, and I make sure to prioritize that. And I think we would be doing you a disservice if we said anything other than that. So prioritize your writing. Our last point was to be involved in outside communities, but we've already kind of mentioned that with the Magic the Gathering thing. Most of us are already involved in other outside communities. It's just a matter of figuring out what those are and how you can kind of market to that particular group without being pushy or rude or making everything about you. It's a very subtle line, but it is an important one. So got a lot of information. We went kind of quickly. Check the show notes if you felt like you missed anything. I know we had a very active room, a very full room. Super happy to see that. Super happy to see so many people here. Molly, you want to bring us through some of the highlights?
As soon as I can scroll back up to wherever the top is and see what we have going on.
I've been trying to do that, and every time I scroll up, somebody writes something else, and then
it
it
shoots you
drops me
back
all the way
down to the
down to the
bottom.
bottom.
So nobody type anything in the chat room for just 30 seconds.
Got to put a moratorium on it.
Everybody's saying hi, hi, hi. At one point, I did see that we had 9 listeners, so that was really exciting. Dennis Lee Bates Jr. was part of the podcast in the chat at the beginning. Dave Fessenden said his wife just gave him a high five after hearing what Aaron said about agents. So way to support your local agent. And Andy Clapp was in the chat room, completely unrelated to anything, but he is in North Carolina and they're having those really big wildfires out there. So Andy, we know what it's like. We kind of went through that here a few months ago. So keep us posted. Let's see, Jacqueline only showed up because she thought there would be chili. No, my dear, the chili will be at Blue Ridge in May. And different sound bites. I'm asking people to tweet when they hear something great on the podcast. Scrolling through. Dave says some newbie editors will charge by the hour at a cheap rate and then take 5 times as many hours to edit the manuscript. Yeah, don't go with a pay by the hour if they're new editors. Jacqueline was kind of shocked, Aaron, that you were in a band. She wants to know what instrument you played, or did you sing? And we have decided that you have to sing for your dinner at Blue Ridge next year.
I will be a very hungry boy.
You played guitar, didn't you?
I did. Yeah,
okay.
I did. The first band I was ever in, I was the singer. I now hate everybody who was in that band because none of them told me I couldn't sing. So how dare they?
Aaron, you really can't sing.
I know where my talents. Oh, I can. I just can't do it well. I'm just
saying this as a friend. You can't sing.
I do it well. I don't do it well, but I can sing.
Okay. Dave, before we got into this part on the show notes, Dave said, look for comparative titles that are similar, but ones that lack some distinctive element that yours has. That way you use these titles as a foil against which you compare yours. There is no need to speak disparagingly about the other books in order to make yours look good. I told him stop peeking at the show notes before we were ready to discuss it. He says that you're using his book, Concept to Contract, as your show notes, which is quite possible because he's your agent. I don't know, but great minds think alike.
Indeed.
And Tess likes the idea of describing with mashups, such as her novella she wrote last year was Roman Holiday meets Bonanza, which gives you a pretty good idea of what it was about. She also said she was at a conference lately, and the agents presented said universally they did not want to hear about Amazon rankings. To them, it means nothing. And she also said that they said blogging, it can be a waste of time. So there was a little discussion in the chat room about whether you should just use the short Twitter and Instagram. I like blogging because it allows, I think Twitter and Instagram are great for those headlines, but blogging allows you to expand on the information that you want to share. Scrolling. If I've missed anything, you guys, I am sorry. We've just never had an active chat room like this for quite some time. Dave says he has over 100 writing tips on his blog posted over the past few years. Is it okay to repeat a post from a couple years ago? I said, yes, absolutely. Recycling post is fine. In fact, I recommend it because you'll reach a current audience. And in fact, that is going to be the topic of my guest post on Edie Melson's blog, The Right Conversation, next Monday.
The other thing, Dave, is compile them into an ebook and sell the ebook.
Yes.
I have one that I give away, Imagination at Work. And that's what it is. It's a compilation of blog posts on creativity.
Sometimes people think it's counterintuitive, counter helpful to give away your books. But for something like that, Al, I think it's fantastic because it's freebie. It gets your name out there. It gets people more interested. Then they're going to come back and pay for the meal. This is just the appetizer.
Well said.
Look, a foodie reference.
Well said. Jacqueline did also ask about, she says her boyfriend writes for the general market and wants to know if there are any tips for getting his foot in the door, in that particular door. And Dave answered that in the chat room saying it's kind of the same thing. It's just a larger, I guess, a larger beast, a larger animal, a larger market, perhaps more competitive, possibly. But I think some of our advice is attend writers' conferences where you can. Make sure you do your research in trying to find agents that have connections, good agents. Same kind of a process. You're just gearing it toward a different market. So I think, Dave, thank you for being my agent, and also thank you for answering that question. Thought you did a really good job. So,
general market is a little more difficult because there's more people writing for it, and they are more agent dependent than some of the smaller groups or the offshoots of those. So, yeah, of course, it's done all the time. And some people are like, well, if this is so hard, I'll never make it. People make it all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure, luck fail, but they can just keep at it. It happens all the time. Every day, somebody's signing a contract for a book.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so
yeah, agreed. Agreed. And if you practice your craft and you become a master at it, you're going to be published. You just got to make sure that you know enough about the business side to get your book to where it needs to be, to get the right eyes on it. But the first step is really knowing your craft and doing it well. So we are well over time, but hopefully we didn't mind a few extra minutes here to talk from the chat room. Again, loved seeing you all here. Next week we've got a 5 Tuesday month again, so we're going to have a second wild card next week. Everything I wish I knew when I started. And so that'll be a fun look at different advice and stuff that we learned after we started writing. So we hope that you'll join us for that. As always, you can find us on aarongansky.com, altongansky.com, and frankly, mydearmojo.com. And we thank you all for listening. Until next week, good writing.